The bus, in an era of bold new transportation promises, the bus hardly has the same appeal of, say, Hyperloops and the electric air taxi. Yet, as we'll discuss today, to dismiss the bus as a bygone solution for public transit could be a costly mistake. Hello and welcome. I'm Luke Bridle, Director of Transportation with HOK. And for the next 20 to 30 minutes or so, we're going to discuss and explore how buses, and in particular bus rapid transit, or BRTs for short, can provide communities with an immediate, flexible and affordable solution to a variety of transportation needs. I'm joined today by Paulo Faria, Senior VP of Architecture and Urban Design with Austin Transit Partnership, Felix Kilbertis, Chief Creative Officer of Pininfarina, and my colleague Christina Ungaranu, who is Regional Leader for Planning for HOK in our Los Angeles studio. So welcome to the three of you. We'd also very much like to hear from you, the audience, so please leave your questions and comments in the chat, and we'll try to incorporate your thoughts into the conversation as well. So let's jump in. Let's begin with perhaps some context. Paulo, what is bus rapid transit and how does it really differ from, say, the typical commuter bus that people may be more familiar with?
Hi, everyone. Bus rapid transit is really trying to bring the benefits of the fixed guideway, like rail, to the to bus networks. So bus rapid transit means it runs in a dedicated guideway that is protected from other vehicular traffic. Some cities allow kind of a taxis and share ride to run in it. Some cities allow bike lanes to kind of be shared with it. But mostly is trying to bring the predictability and punctuality of fixed guideway to the bus network by providing a dedicated guideway. You can integrate that with traffic lights, making sure that the buses have priority, so that kind of makes the increases punctuality and increase the speed that the bus can run. So it's really trying to optimize the bus, bringing it closer as much as it has to dedicated guideways that the rail has.
Got it. So speed and reliability and those sorts of things are kind of key to it, aren't they? Christina, I'm based in New York, and we've seen the MTA here embrace bus rapid transit. You've got the Select Bus Service, of course, the 14th Street Busway is another example. You've worked extensively nationally. What are some of the cities that have embraced bus rapid transit, and how's it working for those communities?
Yeah, I'm a data nerd, so I'm going to back up a little bit. So BRT gained popularity globally at the beginning of the century. In the US, we've got about 450 of these systems today, and that accounts for about 8% of the entire length of systems within the world. In the US, BRT systems exist in all major cities, from Seattle to Oakland to Kansas City to Pittsburgh, which I think was one of the first BRTs in the country, Boston, Miami. In my beloved city of 88 cities here in LA, some local examples are the G line and the J line. And then Metro is planning to add 3 more BRT projects at least by 2028 by the Olympics. Houston just greenlit its University Corridor route. That's 25 miles of BRT, 41 stations. Wow. So that's also slated to open in 2028. So a lot of activity within the United States.
Yeah, and it seems to be, obviously with its popularity, it's working well for them, I can see. Felix, thinking maybe perhaps globally, are there cities either in Europe or elsewhere that have embraced BRTs as well?
I can think of a number of cities. There's a very good example is Munich, where we've just met a lot of our clients also for the what is called the IAA, the Mobility Forum there. And Munich in a European context is a very good example of integrating well-designed bus stations, integrating them with other modes of transportation. Also, having long distance bus services is something that Munich is well integrated in. But I can also think of other places in South America. Brazil has started a new way of looking at buses strategically through Jaime Lerner's initiatives, but also in Colombia. It's really pleasurable to go to cities and experience them through well-designed bus systems.
Right, it's a much nicer way to experience a city when you're above ground and able to take in the urban environment and the context and see the city in front of you. Yeah, it's a much more pleasant way in some instances than being subterranean in a subway for sure. We sort of touched on the cities, I guess, as to cities that are embracing it. But as designers, when we're talking to city planners and to public transportation officials, let's talk about some of the benefits when it comes to bus rapid transit. What are those benefits? We talked a little bit, I guess, Paulo, about the speed and reliability, but are there other things that the various cities are looking to to BRTs to solve? Paulo, do you want to maybe kick us off there?
Yeah, well, I think the flexibility, right? And it ties with cost and cost of implementation. I think the BRT allows for more routes, allows for adaptation of routes, and the scalability of the system. So if you need more kind of a capacity, you put more buses. You need less, you have less. I think that the flexibility and the ease of implementation, comparatively speaking, to fixed guideway or rail, is probably the biggest way. And it's also something that operators understand how it works. If you are implementing a rail system, requires a completely new set of skills and parameters and technology. So I think that the familiarity of the bus that's more ubiquitous gives a bit more sense of comfort within agencies to implement. It's something that people understand and is more at ease in working with.
Yeah, you've touched on sort of cost a few times here too. I also think of buses being able to push into perhaps underserved communities as well in a big way that, say, a transport like a new subway line doesn't have that ability. Christina, I know you've sort of looked at complete streets and those sorts of things as well, but is that something that you're seeing from an urban design side of things that bus rapid transit really addresses?
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the kind of key benefits that's really near and dear to me is the ability for BRT systems to create quality placemaking and to encourage quality placemaking. So if station design is really thought of carefully and integrated with TOD principles, these stations really have this potential to become community hubs, centers of mixed use activity, that generate economic development opportunities, right? These become places for social exchange, for respite, and really for cultural exchange. So that's kind of one of the key urban design benefits. And then you mentioned complete streets. I mean, any kind of BRT redo or system has the kind of potential to really incorporate protected bike lanes, traffic calming measures, other pedestrian safety improvements, that could really transform kind of the placemaking of corridors.
Yeah. Paulo, let's take maybe a step back a little bit for a moment. It's almost like Austin is a bit of a startup in terms of its public transportation with, obviously a need with huge population growth and so forth in the city. I know you've done some interesting analysis of that interface at the bus stop that I guess the anxieties perhaps that people feel waiting for buses. Do you want to talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, we did an interesting cognitive testing of the population. We took 14 people and armed them with glasses that measure where your eyes are looking at, and with heart monitors and sweat metering kind of devices, trying to figure out what are the stress points in the journey. And it was very interesting because different populations, people in wheelchair, have a completely different experience than able-bodied people. So I think that it was quite interesting to see where are the friction points. And one of them is really the waiting experience, right? How people don't necessarily feel comfortable and doesn't feel welcome sometimes on the stations. There's the issues of safety and how people doesn't necessarily kind of want to socialize on bus stops. Everybody's kind of very in their mindset. But I think some of the qualities of sidewalks are important, but more importantly is the activation of street facades
Right.
as you get in and out of stations.
Yeah.
Austin had more than 40 days of temperatures over 100 degrees recently, and thermal comfort that we are now reframing as thermal safety at this point.
Right.
It's our important thing. So there are kind of a clear stress points on the bus journey that, if well designed, probably can be mitigated. And that's what we're trying to do as we design the light rail and expand our bus rapid transit network.
That's really interesting, and I think there's obviously a parallel too between the urban environment or the streetscape itself, rather, and the object or the vehicle. Felix, just thinking of that, your company, Pininfarina, is perhaps best known for its sleek and stunning design collaborations with the likes of Ferrari and so forth. But you've also designed a number of public transportation vehicles. So when when Paolo talks about sort of that anxiety that riders experience on the bus, on the shelter side of things, how does that feed into the design of the vehicles themselves?
So that is of course a very interesting starting point. Those sort of findings, because we do find that you need to address these concerns, these issues, in order to build a compelling service or a compelling product. And I think buses are fascinating things, because exactly that flexibility that we just talked about, and are maybe some of the reasons why there is also some anxiety linked to them, because unlike a fixed rail system, there is no track, there is no direct manifestation of the vehicle coming to you. So one of the anxieties that you have is like, you need to understand, how long will I be waiting for? How much can I trust the displays, for example, in the shelter? How much can I trust the system? If I have an app that allows me to predict things, how well is it then integrated into all of these systems? But then, of course, it's also addressing the comfort on board. And I think this is now getting this is an exciting moment, because, of course, technology has gotten better. We have AC, we have connectivity, we have flat floor designs, especially now as we look into electrification. Not only do the architectures allow for even better access, for example, but also your well-being increases because there's less vibration, for example. So there are a number of factors that we integrate from the customer side, through interviews, through studies with the various stakeholders, but then also really from the tech side, and trying to create an experience that makes sense. And I think you also have now the ability to look at it holistically, because as we move from we used to talk about smart infrastructures, where you need to invest a lot into infrastructures, and then relatively simple vehicles would then follow centralized instructions. But now you have this exciting opportunity where the vehicles themselves are also smarter and smarter. So you can actually create very, very new holistic systems between, say, the bus station, the interfaces that you might have in your pocket through your phone, and the actual vehicles that will transport you.
Yeah, we actually have some images, I think, of one of the bus stops that you designed. Throw those up on the screen, and perhaps talk to some of those design ideas that you're integrating into these bus shelters, and how they address some of those items that you talked about.
So this one, I like this project a lot, because this one is a very specific project. This one was done just a few years ago for Miami, or Miami Beach to be more specific. And I like how it picks up something from the environment. When you look, for example, at the colors that you can see in the semi-transparent roof. During the day, it really picks up these colors. It projects interesting shadows on the seats that become extra inviting because of that. It still shelters you, of course, and it allows people to, feel safe. The information is there where you need them. It talks about other factors like the weather, and it creates almost like a place where you want to meet and where you can rest for a moment. And you also need to think about it, at night as well. So here, the light was very important to give a sense of safety as well. Yeah. So we believe that you need to make it very specific, very site-specific. And that's one of the huge advantages, that you can co-create the environment with with the local conditions.
Yeah, and Christina, you talked a little bit about this too, with complete streets, and how this sort of represents a sense of place as well. But you look at the images that Felix just had up on the screen, and you get the sense of Miami in that, in terms of the color and the materiality and so forth. But that's an important part too, isn't it, from an urban design perspective?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the representation of local culture, of local identity, the opportunities for art and placemaking within station design becomes really important. And, station planning and station design is core and central to kind of a BRT system, right? It's one of the beauties of kind of what distinguishes it from a traditional bus system. I think the other thing that we can kind of keep improving on within the BRT landscape is amenitization of these stops. So are there food and beverage opportunities here? Are there places where you could pick up a coffee? I was just talking to Francis Anderton the other day about metro stops not having a place where you could really do this, and how much more ridership potential you could be gaining if you started to kind of bundle this into a kind of a complete community type of setting at the stations. Yeah. I mean, one thing I wanted to just add is but there's no question that transit is in a state of crisis today. Sure. For the last decade, even before the pandemic, ridership was, significantly reduced. There's, strains on revenue within cities. The systems are, witnessing a lot more crime and social behavior and temporary shelter. These stations being used for temporary shelter. So, for me, what I'm hearing across everyone here that's speaking within their own kind of communities where they're seeing this happen is that the user journey is central. The passenger experience, right, becomes so important. So things like your age, your sex, your race, your socioeconomic status, all of these things contribute to that elasticity of your demand to ride these systems. And so at HOK, for example, we've been doing a lot of research around neurodiversity and how our designs can kind of better respond to neurodiverse users. And that should be central to the way that we're planning BRT systems. Passenger types and motivations are also changing. So, aside from building stations in the right places and building density around them, the other way that we kind of induce demand is through, harnessing these users that don't typically use these systems, right? Your occasional informer riders. So Sure. This could be joy riders that are maybe not only going to work or home, but they're trying to reach an event, or they're trying to get to a food and beverage destination, leisure activities. So that user journey is so central to kind of capturing more of these audiences.
Yeah, I mean, I think everyone sort of hit on this idea of an enhanced passenger experience being a way of attracting people. Certainly, in the last few decades, the shift from just on-time performance of buses and just running a system and running vehicles has shifted to this idea of customer experience. And I think, as you say, that's all very much part of attracting riders and maintaining riders, which is critical to the revenue streams of these agencies as well. I think we've talked a little bit about sort of some of the kit parts, the vehicles, the shelters, and so forth. But a real key part of this too, and we've touched on this to some extent, is the right of way as well. So, Paolo, let's talk a little bit about mode shares and how should we prioritize the different modes within the right-of-way. Are there, say, mobility choices to be judged on things like capacity or efficiency, environmental impact, and placemaking? We've touched on a little bit, but do you want to talk about that a little bit more, about the right-of-way and mode share?
Yeah, I think that we are all, independently of the mode of choice, we are all pedestrians, right? We are all pedestrians to a certain point. So the priority is to create environments that can be pedestrianized and have kind of a comfortable ways to get to your stop or station. So I think that the priority number one is the pedestrian. Following that, I would say micromobility and biking infrastructure, because they are very efficient. They are universal and can be as flexible as the last mile. So providing walkability and connectivity with cycling infrastructure and new mobility, micromobility infrastructure is paramount. And then we can go to cars, right? And then how you actually allow for park and rides and kiss and rides, kind of a experience that are kind of connected with the vehicle. But the truth is that there is no road that we can build that will allow the individual vehicle to, everybody has an individual vehicle. So public transportation is fundamental from an efficiency and business case perspective. So I think that to optimize public transportation, we have to correct the disinvestment in kind of walkability and in the streetscape. The quality of the streetscape ties directly to the usability of the bus.
Yeah, I think, it's really a transportation system, isn't it, that's made up of multiple modes, and buses are a key piece of that. We have one question just quickly from the audience here, and I'll read it out. Could I ever get from Santa Monica to Monica home to Hollywood in under 2 hours during rush hour via any route? Metro Rail sends me all the way downtown, but is direct. But it gets caught up in traffic, 2 hours doorstep to doorstep. Christina, you're in LA, so could this person, anybody, by any chance, get home in 2 hours?
More power to you. I mean, look, this is the power of BRT, right? I just learned a new term recently. You know how there's scope creep, there's BRT creep. So when cities and institutions are implementing BRT, there's different configurations of how that kind of roadway system is designed, right? So there could be moments where BRT has its own lane, and there could be moments where it does not. It has to jump lanes, it has to share lanes, and that can change based on time factor as well, the time of day, whether it's rush hour or not. So the most efficient and effective systems are when you're giving dedicated lanes for as much of the trip as possible. You're giving the bus the right of way, and your stations are properly dispersed. And there's a big planning process that goes along with that, right? Planning BRT is extremely important. You can't just kind of set up the system and assume that it'll work. It's a kind of stakeholder endeavor that requires a lot of people to kind of weigh in and a lot of data to be assessed. So what I would say is, advocating for BRT within communities and across communities becomes important, but it also is a tenuous thing, right? Because you're fighting for space, right? There's different users, there's single occupancy vehicles that also need these. You're fighting for space for parking, right? Particularly within the LA context, that's one of the benefits and the kind of drawbacks of BRT is that it can be watered down or watered up or modified in a lot of different ways, depending on what the community needs, which sometimes creates results of pockets of where it works really efficiently and well, and pockets where that city or that constituency advocated for a different configuration for a whole host of reasons. So you see spotty systems like that all over the United States and all over the world, depending on what's happening in the adjacent community. It's a little bit of an indirect answer. The goal is to get you home sooner than 2 hours, and BRT is a really powerful tool, but it also depends on how it's implemented.
Yeah, I think it also speaks to the power of public transportation to alleviate congestion on our roads. The more you attract people to public transportation, the less single occupancy vehicles are on the road, and then traffic is reduced as a result of that. We've touched on a lot of, as I said before, a lot of the kit parts here, but I think we'd be remiss if we didn't talk about sustainability as well. What are some of the sustainable benefits of public transportation, or sorry, BRT specifically? Felix, do you want to talk about that maybe as it relates to the vehicles to kick us off?
So, I mean, when you start from the vehicle, the obvious one is the reduction in pollution and vibration and noise as we, confidently look into electrification now. And I think that makes a huge difference, because one of the stigmas attached to the buses might be just that, that standing next to a bus in city traffic is very unpleasant. You feel the vibration as a passenger as well. And of course that has an impact in terms of sustainability. The other one we've just mentioned, by enticing people to share space on the road, by sharing vehicles, that also, of course, reduces consumption of electricity and all the other substances that we need to build vehicles, infrastructure, and so on. So it should have a net benefit, also attracting people into shared mobility solutions. Absolutely.
Yeah. Paolo, from a sustainability perspective, when you're thinking from ATP's perspective, is there anything, from a more sort of macro level that we should consider?
Yeah, I think Felix mentioned, right, the cities are choking, and we have to find better and more efficient ways to move people. So the same amount of 60 people on a bus is, if you replace by 60 cars on the street, there is a kind of a huge difference on your impact. So carbon emissions, the electrification of the bus is crucial, as Felix mentioned. And there is hopefully a better investment in water management at the streetscape, right? When I said that BRT are easy to implement, they are easy, but they are not no impact, right? You have to redo your streetscape, you have to rethink your collection of water, and those are all opportunities for more sustainable practice, replacing aging infrastructure with better infrastructure from the water management perspective as well.
Got it. Yeah. So let's put maybe our futurist hats on for a minute. If you look beyond, say, the current modes of transportation, are there other progressive ideas or solutions you see having an impact on transportation in the next decade or so that share some of the benefits of buses? We've talked about them being nimble, that they're able to reach underserved communities, that they have sustainability benefits, that they have cost benefits as well. As a designer of vehicles, Felix, what are your thoughts on other ideas?
I think that there's so many exciting things to think about when it comes to buses and sharing spaces. So one way would be to look at what can we do with the format of the bus as we know it today. For example, one of the key features of a bus today is really like the big size of them, the huge capability, but you also have a human being there. You have a driver there. So it could be quite interesting also to think, okay, how can we help the driver, the person, become a host of sorts, welcoming people on board in a different way. And that becomes possible also thanks to technology, because you have certain assistance systems, you have maybe partial automation, so that person can actually help people in more than just providing essential transportation services.
Yeah. So go on, Colin.
Good. But you could also think about it differently. You can also say, beyond electrification, we also have smart vehicle technologies. We have autonomous drive features. So you could also imagine what would happen if we had a vehicle that not only is capable of steering itself following a pre-planned or predetermined route, but could also react to flexible routes, on-demand services. And therefore, you might be able to maybe reduce the size of the vehicle, because you can then send maybe more than one or two vehicles on there, because you're a bit more flexible in terms of the amount of people you would actually need to pilot them. So it depends on how you look at it.
Yeah.
I mean, one project that I'm very excited about is a prototype of sorts that we've presented at the CES last year, the Holon transportation device. And this one is fun for a number of reasons. First of all, it is a very asymmetrical design. That's something that isn't so usual. But here, the intention was really to give a very transparent face towards the passenger as you would enter it. So really facing the street. The street side is completely flat, very transparent, very inviting. And if you look at it from other angles, the car, you can see the asymmetry. So it kind of has a protective sort of feature towards the street side. And I also think it is very important to make these vehicles very non-aggressive, very, very friendly. And one of the surprising things about this vehicle is actually when you see it in real life, you realize how it is still a big vehicle. It is small for a bus. It is quite a large vehicle, but we wanted it to feel very safe, very friendly, also by giving it these big friendly light signatures, for example.
Yeah,
the interior,
that's all very interesting in the context. Sorry, Felix, go ahead.
Yes. So it's also about making surprising people by giving them unusual proportions and saying like, oh, this is something I've never seen before, making people curious to get in. Once you're inside, of course, you find a very soothing, a very safe and very flexible space. So you can imagine people of various ages or with various mobility needs would find a space where they would feel safe and welcomed.
I think there's an interesting parallel to be drawn with some of the things that Paulo talked about earlier in terms of, you talked about large windows, sort of an appealing face to the street. I think that sort of picks up on some of the anxieties that Paulo mentioned before that the riders are experiencing. Paulo, what about you? I know in conversations we've had in the past, you're a big proponent of an enhanced passenger experience, that the focus should be on the passengers. Something you've talked on, I think, Felix, you mentioned it too, is this idea of having almost a conductor on board or an advocate on board that's not the driver, that's there to help people. I think that's an interesting thing to discuss too, perhaps.
Yeah, I think that the idea of your bus concierge or somebody that helps you with information, there's a lot of people that we are in an age where information is king, right? I think that if I think that about the future, I think about getting information, real-time information where your bus is, to the point that you can even schedule a meeting in a specific bus. All right, I'm in this bus, and you tag me, and you can join the bus. So I think providing the right information to the user, and the fact that buses now can provide real-time information, it is a big asset. And how you make people all tied with this idea of predictability and punctuality, right? People get used to Uber and being monitoring where your Uber is never right, by the way. But I think that just the fact that you can see where your vehicle is,
Yeah.
it makes a huge difference on your kind of a certainty, because nobody wants to wait for anything, right? You don't want to wait for a bus. So if you can go and grab a coffee before you board, because you have the certainty that the buses are running and your bus is on schedule, I think that providing the right information and tying that with your planning tools and providing information even in businesses, can we have the bus information at the Starbucks, for instance? So how we integrate this backbone of information to other things, helping people to plan their trip, I think that will go a long way in making the popularizing even more the bus experience.
Yeah. I mean, information's key, isn't it? And having it in a timely manner. Christine, I'm going to give you the last word on this idea of what's next.
I mean, I'm really excited for the potential, and we're already seeing it, but for the potential for BRT systems in kind of less dense environments, right? We see them operating amazingly in kind of super dense systems all over the world. Curitiba was one of the first places that integrated bus rapid transit and kind of is a poster child. But I'm more excited personally about seeing these systems in cities like Albuquerque, in suburban and urban communities that actually, it's a BRT system that actually can move the needle towards better land use decision making as well, and vice versa, that land use transportation connection in less dense environments.
Right. Yeah, that's a whole other topic for another LinkedIn Live, I guess, isn't it?
Let's do it.
Let's do it. Yeah, for sure. Well, thank you, everyone. This has been super fun and informative, I think. Thank you certainly to Christina, to Paolo, and to Felix for hopping on board with us. And thank you to all of you who've watched along on LinkedIn Live as well. This video will be on HOK's LinkedIn page, and we'll encourage you to keep the discussion going as well in the chat section. So have a great day, and thanks very much for joining us, everybody.
Thank you, Luke.
Thanks.
Thank you.